the first orbital-class spaceship, and Super Heavy booster are being built slowly by SpaceX. For the time being, it's nearly hard to predict when Starship S20 and Super Heavy Booster 4 will be ready for their orbital launch debut, as the FAA currently controls almost everything. According to a NASA document describing a group's plans to film SpaceX's first orbital-velocity Starship reentry, the next-generation rocket's orbital launch debut has been pushed back several months to 2022. But before we continue further, we want you to support us by subscribing our channel. Believe me, your one subscription gives a hell lot of motivation. Now you have subscribed, let's continue. In March 2021, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk verified a rumor that Starship's first orbital launch attempt would take place in July 2021. It seemed unquestionably ambitious at the time, but not impossible. SpaceX has launched a series of suborbital Starship test flights to heights of 10 to 12.5 kilometers, less than half a year before. Beginning in December 2020, SN8, the first physically complete Starship prototype, came dangerously close to landing on its maiden attempt, only narrowly missing owing to an engine and pressurization malfunction. However, in early May, Starship SN20 showcased a number of changes and became the first prototype to successfully launch and land and survive a 10-kilometer test flight, adding fuel to the fires of optimism. Simply said, SpaceX developed 5 Starship prototypes from the ground up in less than 8 months and flew 5 test flights in less than 5 months, all of which were mainly successful. However, that August 6th full-stack milestone is about where SpaceX's H1 2021 progress looked to hit a brick wall for reasons that are less than obvious. That would necessitate a clear path, perhaps due to a desire to focus on orbital launch site building at the expense of road closures or testing. Before even completing a basic test, Starship SN20 stood on a stand for nearly 2 months, by far the longest any Starship prototype has waited. Super Heavy Booster 4, which appears to be in the midst of its third round of Raptor engine removal, has yet to attempt a single test, and it's unclear how near the orbital pad is to being ready to support booster-proof and static fire tests. Although SN20 completed its first pre-burner engine test on Monday, October 18th, neither the ship nor the booster have attempted to static fire their Raptor engines. In light of recent developments in the FAA, Boca Chica environmental review process, the chances of SpaceX attempting the first orbital Starship launch by the end of 2021 have plummeted from reasonable to almost non-existent. From a technological standpoint, it appears that SpaceX might be ready for an orbital launch attempt in a matter of months. From a regulatory standpoint, however, the FAA completing a favorable environmental evaluation and approving even a one-time orbital Starship launch license in 10 weeks would be practically unprecedented. After 2 months of little to no prototype testing, it appears that SpaceX has decided to focus on completing Starbase's initial orbital launch site. Rather of rushing Booster 4, Starship 20 testing, and a launch attempt, engineers are refining vehicle designs and creating additional prototypes, B5, S21, S22. As a result, new and upgraded prototypes like Super Heavy Booster 5 and Starship S21 are preparing to overtake them. Booster 4 and Ship 20 are becoming increasingly improbable to fly. This week, some critical ground support work was completed. The booster-grabbing arms, dubbed Mechazilla by SpaceX, are undergoing final testing before being installed. These 2 arms will be utilized on the orbital launch tower to capture returning Super Heavy boosters, reducing the need for expensive landing legs. This is crucial on the booster itself because greater mass on the rocket equals less payload capacity. The carriage that would support and move the 2 arms, dubbed chopsticks, was placed onto the arms themselves. The structure of the skyscraper. This entire assembly is now housed on a temporary structure on the ground. While crews finish up the last touches, the assembly will then be put onto the launch tower. Because Mechazilla can move up and down, it will be used to load Starships and rockets onto the orbital launch platform in the near future. The tower's arms will also be employed as a hoisting device, avoiding the need for a separate crane on site. SpaceX has delivered a massive mystery tank and the second-to-last cryoshells to Starbase's orbital tank farm in the last 2 days, bringing Starship's first orbital-class launch site one step closer to completion. SpaceX's bespoke storage tanks are likely less expensive than alternatives because they are built in the same Starbase facilities, using the same procedures and parts as Starship tanks. The orbital tank farm is conducting proof testing just next door before it is turned on. Venting was seen from one of the new tanks on September 28. These big tanks are effectively built of Starship parts, letting SpaceX to design their own tanks to their own requirements. Liquid nitrogen was used to check that there were no leaks and that the new tanks could endure holding cryogenic propellants. Because not all of the tanks are finished, proof testing has been done one tank at a time. The orbital tank farm's completion and activation will be one of the most significant milestones in the building of the orbital launch site. On the launch mount, Booster 4 is still waiting for the launch site to be ready before starting its own test campaign. Several Raptor engines were removed from Booster 4 in the last several weeks, and this booster will hoist Ship 20 halfway into orbit during the orbital flight test, which is expected to take place early next year. These engines were most likely returned to SpaceX's test site in McGregor, Texas, where other interesting things are happening. But more on that later. As for Ship 20, it's now based on suborbital Pad B, where it's well into its own test program. The vehicle has passed its preburner engine test and passed successfully test of its Raptor engines in a static fire. On October 12th, a Raptor vacuum engine was installed on Ship 20. Raptor vacuum engines are optimized for usage in space and are far more efficient than regular Raptor engines. Ship 20 is the first Starship to use these new engines outside of the atmosphere. Work on Ship 21 and Booster 5 is picking up speed at the production site. Ship 21's nose cone is housed inside tent number 3, along with a large number of heat shield tiles. Inside the mid-bay, a tank part of the future ship was discovered, signaling that stacking should begin shortly. Outside, the common dome section for Ship 22 was also seen. The stacking of Booster 5 is well advanced, with tile attachment points already built within the high bay, and the grid fins were recently put onto the upper part of the vehicle. Booster 5 is currently divided into two halves inside the high bay, and Booster 5 and Ship 21 are scheduled to launch for the second orbital flight test. A new booster thrust puck was delivered on October 6, which differed from earlier ones in that it features mounting places for 13 Raptor engines, instead of the 9 seen on previous boosters. These 13 inside engines, when paired with the 20 outside engines, will give Super Heavy boosters a total of 33 Raptor engines, more than any other rocket stage ever launched. The foundation construction for the new broader high bay is progressing. This structure will be comparable to the existing high bay, but a little taller and wider. Finally, outside of Boca Chica, at SpaceX's test site in McGregor, Texas, some substantial Starship-related work is being done. The construction of a dedicated Raptor engine factory is well underway. This new long structure will produce Raptor 2 engines, a considerable advance to the Raptor that is nearing prototype testing. Raptors will be constructed at this building and fired on nearby test stands in the future before being transferred to Boca Chica for integration into Starships and Super Heavy vehicles. With all of this information, we've come to the end of our video. That's all I've got for today. So gentlemen, what are your thoughts when the Starship Orbital launch will happen? Will it be built in time for Artemis moon lander and Mars mission? Tell us in the comments section. And if you want to see how SpaceX is planning to start Earth-to-Earth transportation service with Starship, then click on the video floating right side on the screen. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it. Subscribing to this channel and pressing the bell button to be alerted of new SpaceX and Tesla videos is a great way to show your support. See you in the next one. In the meantime, take care.